Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be part 2 in our bolt gun series where we're going to show you how to assemble all of these pieces. If you missed part 1, go ahead and check that out where we go over all the components being used. But as a recap, this build is going to be based on the Aero Solus chassis here in clear Ano. For the barrel, we'll be using the Proof carbon fiber pre-fit, and that is a pre-fit for the Aero Precision Solus action, and of course that comes with its bolt. We have a Timney Remington 700 hit trigger, and for the optic we're going to be using the Leupold Mk4 in the 6-24 with the PR3 with some Badger ordnance rings there. Next up, we'll go over the tools that you're going to need to assemble all this stuff. It kind of sucks buying the right tools, but it's going to pay off, and it makes a huge difference in how quickly it's going to take you to assemble this and how frustrating it's going to be. So just go ahead and spend the money and buy the right tools. You know, it seems like a lot of money, and you're probably going to only use it once, but you could build another rifle with it, or you could offer it to your friends or people in the community to loan out, you know, and be an asset and not just buy it and use it once, you know. So to torque the barrel down to the action, you're gonna need some type of barrel vise. I went ahead and bought the Viper barrel vise. This thing bolts to a table or something like that, and then you stick your barrel in it. Tighten down your barrel so you can torque the action appropriately. We'll do that in a second to show you. You're gonna need a couple different types of torque wrenches, one in foot-pounds to torque the barrel to the action, one in inch-pounds to torque the action to the chassis and everything on the chassis, like the scope and the night vision bridge, is all in inch-pounds. So I've got the Fix-It 6 kit, and it's got their little inch-pound torque driver on there, so it's a great little kit, and I've been using it all the time, very often since I've got it. To check head spacing with the bolts and the barrel, make sure that's all good. We got some go, no-go gauges in 6.5 Creed. And to torque the action onto the barrel, I did just buy Aero's action wrench. This is specific to different actions, and these lugs interface with the Solus action. This is a 22 mil socket, I believe, so you know, you'll need a 22 mil socket, and that, you know, depends on what you have there, either a 3/8 drive or half-inch drive. And then you'll need varying hex and Torx bits for the chassis and the scope. Pretty straightforward tools. You're probably going to have the Torx and the hex bits and maybe the sockets, but you might not have the action wrench or the barrel vise or like the big torque wrench, like the foot-pounds torque wrench. You know, if you work on cars or something like that, or you already have one, that's great. You know, worst case, just phone up a friend and see if you can borrow theirs. Also, one more thing I'd recommend, anti-seize for the threads of the barrel going into the action, and then Vibratight for the fasteners in the chassis and the scope rings and in the night vision bridge and stuff like that. So started using Vibratight instead of blue Loctite, because Loctite gets hard and it kind of just gunks up the fastener threads that you're using. The Vibratight essentially does not solidify, and it still is able to keep that fastener from backing out. That's all the tools, and that's all the liquids and grease that you're going to need. So let's get into it. The Proof comes with these little rubber protective things. We'll take those off. Unfortunately, they do leave some rubber residue in the threads. You're going to want to get that off. Ideally, you want a completely clean surface in there. Any particles or metal shavings, when you torque this thing down, it's going to, over time, because it's not really getting fatigued that bad, but it could cause imperfections and cracks, you know, at that extreme level. So always a good idea to make sure your parts are free from any debris, dirt, crap in the threads before you put them together. Not only do you want to make sure your barrel threads are clean, you also want to make sure the threads in your action are clean as well. This thing's gonna ship from the factory with some oil in it, and it's shipped in a case with styrofoam, so those styrofoam particles and whatnot could be in there. And it's been sitting in my safe, honestly, so it's actually kind of dusty. It's a good idea to put some type of tape. A lot of people recommend drywall tape. or whatever tape you have on hand really will do just fine, just to protect that barrel shank. Loosen this up a bit. You want to make sure this is tightened up pretty good because this is going to be reacting the torque. Alright, next you're going to take some type of anti-seize and put that on the threads. There you go. So you want to kind of go in the opposite direction until your threads catch, and then just ease it on there. The last thing you want to do is thread this thing, and then you're out of barrel and in action. I was wrong. The Solus action wrench is a 7/8 socket, not a 22. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. Get that snug. Go ahead and put our torque wrench to 75 foot-pounds. Aero makes that easy. It's on the torque wrench right here. 75 plus or minus 5 foot-pounds. So we'll find our foot-pounds here. There's 75. Make sure that's good. Go ahead and torque that down. This is a click type. So there's our click. So that's 75 pounds. In this case, we're actually going to take this off and retorque it just to make sure it's torqued appropriately. Without getting into the details, there's a bunch of different torques, and since this has grease on it, your wet torque number is probably not the number that they're providing to you. So we just want to make sure the threads are seasoned and the torque that we're applying is the actual torque that's going to hold this and not let it slip out. I don't think it would, but just for good measure, just going to torque this one more time. Get it snug with the socket. Alright, that's it. So it's as simple as that. What really makes a difference is having the right tools, the correct action wrench, and a barrel vise mounted to something that's secure, like this workbench I just threw together. So we'll get this out of here and take it inside and finish it up. You can see why that tape's important. When you clamp that thing down, it's really going to mar up the tape. I probably could have put an extra layer on it. If you didn't do that, it would just mar up your barrel there. Okay, so once you get your action torqued to your barrel, the first thing you want to do is check head spacing, right? Because if your head spacing is not correct, there's no sense in putting this whole thing together, because you're just going to take it back apart. So I did buy a couple, or a go and a no-go gauge from Brownells here. So if you can look at this gauge, it's got a little flat part, a little chamfer there, and that's supposed to line up with where your extractor is. Now we're going to try and get away with not taking out the extractor. You just got to get this lined up with where the extractor would be. So we'll put our bolt in there, and we'll start with the go gauge first, because no sense in continuing if this doesn't work. And we'll kind of just try and line up that flat part on where the extractor is. That looks pretty good. Alright, so this is the go gauge. So if the head spacing is correct, the bolt should fall with normal force. And so there we go. It does. So that means our head spacing is correct. You shouldn't have to force this. This is the normal force that I use to close the bolt when there's no gauge in there. So we'll take this out and put the no-go gauge in there just to make sure that the head spacing is not on the very edge of the limits. We don't want a head space that's edging. That causes problems. So again, we're going to line up that flat part with the extractor, the bolts forward, and you can see here I cannot close the bolts with normal force. You do not want to crank on this thing and jam the bolt down and basically chamber that, because it's going to damage where your barrel is. It's going to damage going to damage the chamber of your barrel if you try and force that. So that all looks good. Head spacing is good to go, so we'll put these away and continue on. Alright, once you got your action barrel head spaced appropriately, next thing you want to do is install your trigger. Now the Solus action comes with this trigger hanger right here, and I've already put it together. It's 2 pins right here and right here. This hanger sits on top of the trigger, and these pins, you don't need a punch or anything, you can just hand press them in. Alright, so once you got your hanger pinned on the trigger, it's just one fastener that holds this trigger hanger into the action. So you just set your trigger in there like so. It's pretty obvious. There's a little lip here on the hanger, and there's a lip on the action where this fastener goes. So you'll put that in there. We'll put a little bit of Vibratite on this fastener, and it's going to be a T10 Torx. And again, I like to start these fasteners by going in the opposite direction until it seats, and then you can tighten it up. Going in the opposite direction just prevents you from cross-threading and having a terrible day. And for the trigger hanger fastener, we want that to be at least 17 inch-pounds, so we'll use the Fix-It Sticks torque driver, really handy to have. And we'll just torque that down to 17. There we go. Barreled assembly, essentially. We have our barrel, our action, and our trigger all installed. And this is ready to go into the chassis. Alright, now for installing the barreled action to the Solus chassis, there are 2 captured fasteners in the chassis itself, and they're going to bolt to the action. They're pretty easy to see where it's going to bolt to. You have a fastener hole in the very back, and a fastener hole near the recoil lug, and you can line that up in the chassis. There's a little slot cut right here for where the recoil lug is, and you can see here these 2 captured fasteners in the chassis. The rear one's a little difficult to get to because when the chassis comes, it's got the pistol grip installed, and that cutout for the hole is right next to the pistol grip. So you might have some trouble getting a driver on that fastener. So what we'll do is raise these captured fasteners and get a drop of Vibratite on them. For the rear one, I'm going to have to push it up with the driver. Alright, installing your barreled action to the chassis, pretty simple. You're just going to want to seat it in there. It's almost easier to do this upside down to start, because you can see your fastener in the front there. And for these, it's going to be a 3/16 hex. So again, just get those started. There we go. And that'll just kind of capture the action on there, because what you're going to want to do, once we get this rear one seated, this one's a pain in the ass, just because of the pistol grip. It'd be easier to honestly take the pistol grip off and then install this thing. You're just going to watch me struggle through it. Alright, so what you want to do is to sit this on its ass and make sure that the action is seated as far to the rear in there as possible. I'll go ahead and snug these up. Definitely recommend taking the pistol grip off. Alright, finally got that snug. We'll go ahead and snug this one up. And we'll put our torque driver back on here. So for the chassis to action fasteners, these are going to be 60 inch-pounds. So again, we're using our Fix-It Sticks torque driver here. Alright, good thing I just bought this mechanics set from Home Depot. Got a little extension there, crisis averted. So we'll go ahead and get this torqued down to 60 inch-pounds. That's pretty stout there. Alright, that one's good. Hopefully this one fits. That's what she said. Alright, we'll go to 60 there. Just right. Alright, now our action is torqued to the chassis. Looks pretty sweet so far. The only thing I don't like about this thing is you gotta raise up the cheek piece to get the bolt in. That will be solved once they have their folding stock adapter. Nice. We can go ahead and install our night vision bridge. So again, we'll put some Vibratites on those fasteners, just a little drop. And instead of getting hard, this stuff kind of stays in a goo and retains the fastener instead of just gunking up the threads with hard Loctite. So the night vision bridge is a T10 Torx, I believe. That'll work. Get those fasteners seated. And not across the way. There we go. Spin those down. And we'll do these to 17 inch-pounds as well. Just do the same as the trigger hanger. I don't think Aero gives a torque rating for these, but we'll just keep it pretty light. It's not really load bearing, I guess, unless it's holding the PVS sturdy. That would be important that the bridge didn't fly off, but we'll go to 25. How about that? Looks good. Alright, it's all set. There's our complete rifle with the Aero Precision chassis and the proof barrel and the Aero action. Looking pretty sweet so far. Last step, we'll get this Mark IV mounted up here. Alright guys, last up, we'll go ahead and get this Mark IV mounted. Again, tools are using the Fix-It Sticks torque driver, and we have some Fix-It Sticks levels as well. So we'll go ahead and put this on the pick rail, and the table's level. It should be level, and the gun's just resting on the level, or resting on the table, excuse me, so that's level. And we'll put the scope in there. Alright, so we'll check eye relief, got it on max power. Just want to see where my head rests. It needs to come back a little bit. Alright, that looks looking pretty good. Rings aren't close to the center of the scope, so don't want these rings touching this chamfer or the center of the scope at all. So now we'll just get our top rings and get some Vibratite on this and then torque it down. This is it's another T10 for the screws on this Torx boot. We'll go reverse, get them started. Do the same thing for the back rings here. Just get a drop of Vibratite on there. Alright, we're just going to get these screws started. I'm not going to fully torque them down because I want to make sure this scope is level. So you have another level in that pack, so usually you can just put that on top of there and make sure my matches your other level that's mounted to the gun. That looks pretty good. Alright, so the scope's level, or we're assuming that it's level because our levels are matching up, right? Yeah, they could have errors in the levels. Yada, yada, yada. We'll verify that later on with a tall target. But anyway, for our sake, we're just going to assume that the scope is leveled to the mount, it's leveled to the gun, and it's leveled. So now we want to torque these upper rings down and these fasteners, and you want to do this and make sure you have even gaps on either side of your ring. You don't want one side bunching up more than the other. So this takes a little trial and error. Like right now, just by looking at it, this side of the ring is higher than, or has a bigger gap than the other side. So I'm just going to actually loosen up the side that's clamped down too much a little bit, and then tighten the side that has the bigger gap a little bit, and kind of just keep doing that until both gaps are even. If you tighten one side up, it could kind of pull the scope to one side. Those look pretty good. And you know, we're not getting super technical here with using a feeler gauge or anything like that. I'm just kind of eyeing it up. I spent a few years looking at scratches and gouges and stuff like that on airplanes, so you kind of get a good feel of depths and, you know, smaller distances like that in the thousandths. Seems crazy, but it is actually true. Alright, so that was pretty good. So we'll get the back ring tightened up. Scope is still level. Tightening up these fasteners, making sure the gap on the rings is even on both sides. So right now I can already see that this right side has a bigger gap. So we'll loosen the left a little bit. Tighten down the right. Alright, that looks pretty good. Alright, so now we'll torque down the ring fasteners. Right here, Badger says 15 to 18 inch-pounds for the cap screws, so we'll go ahead and do that. Again, using the Fix-It 6 torque driver here. I think it's really handy. It's worth the money for sure. And it's not much. We'll make sure all these are snug first before we torque, so we don't get any play in there in the torque reading. And of course we are going in a star pattern here, just making sure they're snug before we torque. You don't want to get a torque reading if the fastener's not snug already. Then you're going to have run-in torque, and these aren't run-in torque numbers. So there we go. It's 15, 15, and 15. We'll do the back. 15. 15, and then one more time. Alright, so that's it. It's not much torque, right? 15 inch-pounds, but that's installed. And now we want to do the big cross bolts, and that's a 1/2 inch drive, which is pretty smart. Badger made it for, you know, Marines. Everybody has a 1/2 inch socket or a 1/2 inch wrench laying around, so again, we'll snug those up without the torque driver, and making sure that it's forward in the Picatinny slots. Looks good. Alright, that's good. So torque driver, and this is going to go to 65 inch-pounds, which is the max on this little Fix-It stick inch-pound driver, which is convenient. The only tricky part with this is torquing it where you have the line on the fix-it stick visible. So that's 65. Do one more. It's not a click type or electronic, it's just these lines on there, and you got to line up right there for 65. And that is it, guys. Here she is. I'll take these levels off. Alright, so here's the 6.5 bolt gun build. Again, the base is an Aero Solus chassis with an Aero Solus action, proof carbon fiber barrel, 24 inches, and 6.5 Creedmoor, and topped with a Leupold Mk4 6-24 with the PR3 reticle. Pretty pumped on how this looks and how it came out. Just waiting on the accessories now. Need to buy some type of bipod, looking at the Accu-Tac, and then hopefully my Diligent Defense Enticer will get out of jail pretty soon. We'll just direct throw that on. So we'll get this out to the range, and the next part, do our tall target test, get it zeroed, and start sending some rounds downrange. So thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video.